Hello, everybody. My name is Franklin, and I'm really excited to do my second Ask Me Anything About Language Learning with you today. Again, my name is Franklin, and this is first1000hours.com. So, we're going to go right into this presentation. And what I did is I got some questions from Quora just in case no one would be here, and we're just going to continue and go forward with this presentation. Anyway, so this is the first question that I saw in Quora that I wanted to share with you today, and it is there any app which can help me learn Spanish? And so I know that, as you probably know, one of the most popular apps is Duolingo, but the app that I would recommend strongest would be the app that I personally use even to this day. And well, it's not on my phone at this point, but I use the program I just used it this morning. It's called LingQ, and LingQ is something that helps me read native level Spanish content. And I've used LingQ to help me read over 1 million words in Spanish. And so, like I said, I use LingQ to help me read, and I read in Spanish as a daily habit. And so that has been really helpful. A lot of the apps are going to basically help you in like a beginner stage. But then when you get past the beginner stage, then and you want to go into native level content, you need something to help you do that. And so I recommend using LingQ. And I'll put a video up here if you haven't seen that. It's called LingQ versus Duolingo, which one is better? And then you'll see that why I recommend LingQ even more. Okay, so all right, we're gonna go into the next question. And again, if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask me questions. This is a little bit more spontaneous live stream, and I can entertain the questions because I've made that space available. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next question. How long will it take me to master speaking Spanish from scratch? So I've done a video called How Long Will It Take to Learn a Foreign Language? And I'll put a YouTube card up here just in case you want to see that video. But this is my philosophy, even more than just that video. I'm like, why learn a language and then just let it go? Why not continue to use the language as a lifestyle? So when I think about Spanish, at least in this point in my life, maybe I'll change my mind or something like that, but I've thought about using Spanish for the rest of my life because it's not a study for me, but it is, Spanish is part of my life. And so when I think about mastering a language or mastering Spanish specifically, I think that's just a lifetime. Now, obviously, people have gotten up to a high level and it doesn't take them their whole life to do that, but there are going to be things to always learn. And so because I'm not just focused on the intricacies of the language itself, but I'm using the language to help me learn other things, I see how I can just continue to use this for the rest of my life. And so I get to, for instance, switch more things that I do in English if I want into Spanish. For instance, it's funny, but when some people look at my phone, right? I have my phone or whatever, and then they, like, for instance, one thing that happened recently is someone was looking at my phone and I wanted to show them something on Facebook, and then immediately they're like, "Oh, Franklin, this is in Spanish," and I forget. Okay, yeah, I changed my Facebook settings to Spanish. That's like, okay, it's not a big deal for me. That's part of my life. And then even my phone settings are in Spanish. And so when people are looking at that, they see this in Spanish. My YouTube settings sometimes are in Spanish, and my Google account sometimes are in Spanish. And so there's just a lot of things that are in Spanish that I take for granted because it's part of my life. And then even I have a Spanish Bible, I have an English Bible that I'll bring with me, and and then I also am reading in Spanish, and I just do more and more things in Spanish. So I have more ways in which is actually useful to me in my real life. And so I wouldn't try to just rush to mastery. There's just so many things to learn, but I would be content with a long-term process, and at the very least, spend 1,000 hours with it. But if you look at the title of my channel, I've called it First 1,000 hours. So I recognize that language learning is more than 1,000 hours, but I think that if you're going to be, going in a serious way with language learning, it's at least good, I think, to spend 1,000 hours with a language. Let's go ahead and continue into the next question. And it's this: What are the employment opportunities after learning Spanish? Now, honestly, I don't know. I don't know because I think that question depends a lot on how you have learned Spanish and your motivation to learning Spanish and all of that. I was just thinking about this in my mind. It's like what comes first, opportunities or a skill set? Now, I would say that sometimes opportunities come before a skill set, but I would also say sometimes your skill set comes first. And so that means different things to different people. People sometimes say they learn Spanish after just spending a few days with it. And then you're like, oh man, why haven't I gotten those opportunities that I want because I spent 5 days learning a language or I've spent 5 minutes learning a language and now these opportunities should be falling in my lap. But then there's other people that spend, not only do they spend time, but then they're also even, I think, a little bit different in the way that they approach learning a language, which will give them opportunities that are a little bit more unconventional. And I think one thing I want to do is I want to put something on my screen that I have just tried to do right now. And this will kind of illustrate this, I think, hopefully. So let me try to drag this over to my screen. Let's see how this happens or how this is. I'm going to show you my LinkedIn learning profile. And so let me go ahead and show you my screen. Here it is. And I'm going to just expand the screen a little bit so that you can just see these little certificates. Okay, so I know if you watch some of my update videos, you know that I just finished my WordPress 5 Essential class, and that was in Spanish from LinkedIn Learning. But I just finished yesterday Fundamentals of CMS or Content Management Systems, and so that's something else that I've looked at. I'm also right now. I started this yesterday. I'm in a class in Spanish to help me learn YouTube for business. So I'm learning about how to do like YouTube ads, but it's a class in Spanish. And so I am using Spanish and I'm learning more Spanish, but at the same time, I'm using that as a tool to help me learn other things. And so I can tell you, no matter if someone is going to help, maybe in the future, if I happen to get a job for Spanish, that's cool. But even if it's not even related to Spanish, because I'm using my language in a real world setting, I have more opportunities than I would say the common language learner that only is focusing on the language itself. I'm focusing on getting skills that are even outside of Spanish. So that's something I would say to consider. All right, as you are thinking about opportunities and language opportunities and all of that. And you know, I just want to show you this. Like I don't know what certificate do you think would be looking better for a job? Now, obviously, this depends on the job you want. Would it be going through things like this, like going through courses that are going to help you in maybe social media marketing, or just having a certificate that says like I got a B, I got to a B2 level? You know, I don't know. I guess maybe for if you're teaching, maybe people will look at those certificates of a B2 or C1 or C2 or something like that. But I think that it's better to have these other certificates. But you know, I might take some. I might try to see if I can get certified as B1 or B2. I mean, sorry, like C2 or C1 or something like that in the future. And I'll let you know about that if I actually try to do that. But I'm not really focused so much on that at this point. Okay, so I need to take this off my screen. Let's see if I can do that. And I want to go back and show you my presentation. All right, here we go. So we're going to go into another question. And it is this: why do Americans speak Spanish? So, you know, I just briefly looked at one person's answer to this question, and they said, you shouldn't generalize. And in one sense, I'm going to have to generalize a little bit right now because I would like to know, what Americans are you talking about? I would say in America in general, especially for people that were born in America. I'm not talking about people that immigrated to this country, but for people that were born in America, I think that we have been proud monolinguals. We like speaking English to the exclusion of learning any other language. And I think an American mindset or a proud monolingual mindset is that everybody else needs to learn English, but we don't need to learn any other language. And so I would say that a lot of times the reason why people speak Spanish are because they might have they immigrated to America, or they might have parents that speak the language. But I think it's a rare thing for someone to actually learn Spanish on their own and then go ahead and speak that. I think that there's a lot of people in America that also do speak Spanish and all of that, but it's just rare in America, because there's a lot of people that do speak Spanish in America, no matter where you are. I mean, right now I live in an area where there's not a lot of Spanish speakers, but if I drive like 25 minutes away, there's a lot of Spanish speakers. And if I drive like an hour away from where I live, I mean, I could be in an all Spanish, I mean, not an all Spanish town, but a town that has a lot more Spanish speakers. And so, there's a lot of pockets in America where there's people that speak predominantly Spanish, or I would say there are pockets in America that where people speak predominantly Spanish. I'm not saying that is indicative of the whole country or something like that, but anyway, there's places where you can go where people speak Spanish, and then there are Spanish churches where people speak Spanish as well. So you can get opportunities to speak Spanish. And then I think that some people that take it upon themselves to learn Spanish are doing that because they want to reach out to that type of community. All right, let's continue. Why should I learn Spanish? Now, I actually did a video about this, but basically I would say that there's a lot of reasons why it's good to learn Spanish. And I would just broaden that to saying, to asking that question, why should I learn a language in general? One of the reasons why I think it's good to learn a language is because it helps us to be content with a long-term process. I think in America, and probably in other places as well, the tendency is for us to be consistent with something for like 1 or 2 days, and then we lose interest in that. But I think that when you have a long-term interest on something and you can continue that over a period of 1,000 hours at least, then you are building up a character that is going to help you when you approach other situations, because you might turn into being someone that is not easily discouraged when you don't understand or get to the level you want to right then. And so I think it's a useful skill to help you with other things. But then why should you learn Spanish? If you're in America, like I said before, there's a lot of Spanish speakers, and the opportunities will come when you have the skill for the language. And so I would focus on getting a skill and being serious about that, and you're going to, I think, have the answer to why you should learn Spanish even more clearly in your mind. But I think a lot of times what happens is sometimes people try to discourage you from learning a language or learning Spanish or whatever language you're trying to do based on their failures of getting to a high level in the language. And they might have not seen examples of people getting to high level, and so they might think, okay, well, don't waste your time on doing that. I tried to do it and I didn't get there, and so I don't think you're going to get there, and you should do something that's more productive with your time. But it could be that that person did not really focus on the right type of strategy. That person might have not focused on something. I mean, yeah, they might have not just focused on the right strategy, and so they might just think that you're going to have the same experience as them. But I'm thankful that we do have the internet where we can actually see how people have gotten to high levels, and so success has a path, and so you can actually follow on a path that might take you on a different route than the people that might be discouraging you from learning another language. And then the other thing I would say is that why should you learn Spanish? I think that we should continue to grow in our life. We shouldn't be stagnant in saying, okay, well, I reached a plateau in my life. I'm now in my 30s or something like that, and it's time to now check out on learning because I've done all the learning I need to do in my life. I don't think that's a good mindset, but it's better to continually learn. And also, especially when you have a service mindset, when you're like, okay, I want to be a blessing to more people. I want to increase my usefulness for the Lord. Then you can actually connect with more people, and then I think it's a good thing. So I would say that Spanish, among other things, is something that is good to learn. And if you're gonna learn it, take it seriously. That's what I would say. That would be my my counsel. Okay, let's go on to the next question here. And again, I should tell you this. Again, if you do have a question for me, just feel free to ask me. I'm here on this live stream, no matter if no one else is here, and I'm going to continue as if I was speaking to 100 or 1,000 people. All right, but I am opening this up for people to ask questions. All right, let's continue. It says here, this question says, when I speak Spanish to native Spanish speaking, when I speak Spanish to a native Spanish speaking person, they often reply in English. Why do you think they do that? Now, I have had that experience as well. And, I want to speak in Spanish. If I'm talking to you in Spanish, I want you to respond back to me in Spanish. But I think that we have to think differently. Now, first of all, I should put a disclaimer in and say I can't read people's minds. So I can't tell you exactly why someone specifically does that to you. But I'm going to just talk about things from my experience and from my thought process. Okay, let's say that I go to Honduras, which is something I actually want to do one day. I want to actually go on a mission trip to Honduras one day if, God opens up the way and all of this. And I start speaking to someone, I want to speak to them in Spanish. I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to speak to them in Spanish, but then they might want to respond back to me in English because they might want to be practicing their English. So, you might want to get something from that person. You might want to have that experience where it will further you and your Spanish learning journey, but they also might want to speak to you in English so that they can further their English learning. So, so who wins? I would say that if you come to the perspective that you're there to serve that person, then just speak to them in English. There's a lot of opportunities that you'll have to speak to people that just want to speak in English, especially if you're talking to people that might have just come to the country or might not be strong in English. Those are the type of people that are going to be more inclined to speak to you in Spanish. I would even say it's kind of funny sometimes and kind of interesting, but even if you have a language partner, now this is a generalization, it's not all people, but even if you have a language speaker that or a language partner that predominantly speaks Spanish, it might be more likely that they might even speak more and more to you in Spanish than in English, even though you might be a predominant English speaker. I think we kind of like to speak in our predominant language sometimes, and it's a rarity that we try to get outside of that box and actually use the language you're trying to learn, exclusively. So, I would just try to associate yourself with people that are trying to learn English as opposed to people that might have gotten to a higher level in English, and then you're going to find that you'll be able to speak Spanish with them more. Okay, so as a general rule, of course, I'm just talking in generalities right now. Okay, so if the majority of your neighbors speak Spanish, is it more polite to greet them in bad Spanish, or should you stick to English? So I would say that it depends on what you want to do. If you want to learn Spanish, then go ahead and speak to them in your bad Spanish. I think we forget that when we first started learning English, we spoke really bad English. When we were babies, we were just babbling. It didn't sound good, and people just encouraged us in our journey, and they were excited that we just babbled. And they were excited that we were speaking. And then eventually we got better and better in English. And so why should we expect something different when it comes to learning Spanish? We expect ourselves to get to this high level without actually going through a process. And that's problematic. So I would say, if you want to talk to people in Spanish, don't worry so much about if it's bad or not. I would more so worry about if you're being understood, and just try your best to speak the best Spanish you can, but give yourself the ability to be okay with making mistakes. I've said this story a little bit here. I've gone to a Christian Zoom meeting, and I have spoken in Spanish, and my Spanish has not been the best. And I even know that. I feel a little bit embarrassed sometimes when I've spoken, but I know that people understand what I'm saying, and so I can't fault myself too much. So the best thing I can do is just continue to be in environments where I have those opportunities to speak, and I just go ahead and speak, and don't worry about whether or not it's good or bad. And we might think that we're speaking really good Spanish, but compared to what a native speaker speaks, they can, I mean, what a native speaker speaks, they're going to be on a higher level than us. But I think that a lot of times, I think native Spanish speakers are forgiving, and they can understand what we're saying, and they're not trying to expect us to get to like this perfect level in Spanish. They just want to communicate. So, I think that people in general like to hear their native language. And so if you are going and trying to just speak to them in their native language, then I think that they would appreciate that. So I would not be afraid or ashamed or whatever your inhibitions are in speaking in what you call bad Spanish. All right, let's go ahead and look at another question here. All right, so this is a question that says, if I have a strong passion for both Spanish and Japanese, which language should I learn first? Again, I would say that just depends on some of your goals and some of the things that you want to do. You just have to realize that language learning is a long-term commitment. And so especially if you are if you are a native English speaker and you're learning and you want to learn like an Asian language, you have to know that language structure is further away from English than Spanish is. And so it might take you longer to learn Japanese than it's going to take you to learn Spanish. And so you just have to think about, okay, what are my priorities? And you can pray as well and ask God, like, which one should I do first? But just think about that, and then be committed to learning one, and just taking it through the process, spending at least 1,000 hours with it. And I have talked a lot about different language learning strategies on this channel that can be helpful for you in your language learning journey. So I guess that's all I can say on that. And so I also want to let you know that I have on the screen a video about Duolingo versus LingQ, which language learning software is better. So you might like that. And there will also be a video that YouTube recommends. And I hope to see you in the next video.